Today I learned about Third Man Syndrome, an unseen presence reported by mountain climbers and explorers during traumatic survival situations that talks to the victim, gives practical advice and encouragement. By user my_name_is. Nitrain84. My grandpa was a Korean War vet. This sounds hokey and I don't share it often, but he related a story before he passed away. He was in a trench under heavy fire and someone, he assumed his sergeant, came by to check on him, and then left and moved on to the next trench. My grandpa thanked his sergeant for looking in on him the next day, and his sergeant denied ever getting out of his own trench. He could find no one who would admit to checking on him that night. He also believed it was his guardian angel. Seraphinas. I'm a nurse. I've worked swing shifts for years. Once in my youth, I lived alone in a ground floor apartment with a cat. It was my night off, but sleep was rare and sporadic, and I had fallen asleep, fully clothed, while reading in the bedroom. I heard a voice that sounded so close it could have been from someone on the pillow next to me. It was a woman's voice, very stern, who said, "You need to get up, now." The last word seemed so loud it was almost like she was yelling right in my ear, so I shot out of the bed. It scared me, because I thought someone was in my room, but I immediately heard another noise at the door. Someone was trying to break into my apartment. I don't know what it was. A dream? My subconscious trying to alert me to danger? I don't know. Von Dierkman. I was in a serious car wreck at 18 involving a speeding fully loaded tractor trailer, and right before impact I heard very clear voice that sounded just like me that said relax for impact, told me if I survived that, then I had to be prepared for the next step, counted the flips and rolls of the vehicle for me, and then told me to shut the engine down, gather the important things, and kick my way out. It very much felt like a second me in the car to talk me through, and it's probably why I survived, because it kept me completely calm and able to function through the whole thing. I'm pretty sure I was just talking to myself, but it didn't feel like it. Worried. Pi 7025. A friend and I were walking home from the clubs in Florence, Italy. We walked past an American girl walking the opposite way, her GPS blaring where to go. She seemed drunk. We walked past her, paused, then turned around to look at her again. We turned around and there was an American man looking very fresh and clean for 4 a.m. He said, "Is that your friend over there?" We said, "No." He asked, "Should you go be her friend?" We went to walk her home and waited her door for her friends to buzz her up. Right next to her apartment door was a man hiding behind a parked car, exposed, jacking off the entire time we stood there. My friend and I held hands and booked it all the way home after the girl got inside safely. When we got home, we began discussing what just happened. I said, "What about that beautiful blonde man who told us to help her? He was wearing the exact outfit my dad used to wear on Sundays." She was like, "Blonde?" "No, he was Latino like me and was dressed just like my dad." It's still the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. Serenidade. A friend and I lost the trail in the snow once when we were backpacking in the mountains. Couldn't find our way back to it. I saw footprints in the snow, one horse, one llama, and one human. Sometimes there would just be animal tracks, like the human was riding. Sometimes their tracks were visible, like they were leading the horse. On a hike in the same area a few years earlier, we'd met a llama herder who brought his flock into the national forest to graze during the summer. I thought, it's got to be that guy. We can follow his tracks out to safety. Convinced my friend to give it a try. I followed those tracks over the pass, and we eventually got back off the snow, back onto the trail. My friend swore he never saw a single track. Wasn't aware of this phenomenon before, but now it makes me wonder. Funkla Burger. This actually kind of happened to me. One time I was very lost in unfamiliar rainforest. I was full on panicking and running through thick brush, getting stabbed by thorns and falling over every 5 seconds. At one point some voice in my head was like, "Just sit down and shut up." So, I did, and a few minutes later I hear a very distant truck horn. Ran straight toward the sound and eventually hit a highway. Unremarkable student. My mom had something unusual like this happen twice in her life. First time, she was driving on a dirt road, and she swore someone told her to put her seatbelt on, which she rarely ever did in her younger years living in a very unpopulated area. Anyways, an animal jumped out in front of her, and she ended up in a head-on collision with a tree. She lost her 2 front teeth and totaled the car, but the voice telling her to buckle up saved her life. The second event was before her death. She kept mentioning she wouldn't be around much longer and, in particular, would say how she would die in her place of work. I honestly thought she was being dramatic and silly. However, unbeknownst to me, she started journaling everything from passcodes for banks and accounts to notes for my future pregnant self. She left little notes in my favorite books in the few months leading up to her death. She ended up having a ruptured left ventricle and died at her place of work a month after turning 60. Auntie_Nat. I experienced something similar when I was 16. I had been in a car accident and the car was totaled. I was wearing my seat belt and uninjured. During the crash, I heard a voice coming from the empty back seat yelling for me to duck, which saved me from getting crushed by the roof as I rolled over. Then it was a series of instructions on how to safely get out of the car and how to get help. I know it was my brain doing all of this, but it really felt like someone else was there telling me what to do, like I was wearing an earpiece or something. Dragoonscaper. My cousin lost his father and older brother and almost lost his mother when he was younger. Drunk driver hit their car head-on. After he was rescued from the vehicle, he swears he had someone come sit beside him and comfort him. But when he asked the people on the scene, no one else saw this person. Fiverone Freshie. This happened to my uncle and cousin. They got caught in a riptide swimming off a beach in California. They both swear they saw a man in a suit floating waist-high a couple 100 feet offshore. They said they heard him tell them to swim parallel to shore, jump out of the water, do a front flip, and disappear. They did and survived, swore it was an angel. Rocket 69. I was in a really terrible car accident a few years ago and I was stuck in the car. They had to cut me out. During it there was a woman who had climbed into the rear seat behind me and was holding my shoulders telling me I was going to be okay, and that help was coming. I thought she stayed with me until I blacked out and woke up to a fireman cutting the door off and pulling me out. The firemen, paramedics, and my mother who had gotten there quickly all said there was no woman at all, that traffic had gone around, and no one had stopped because the fire department was only a few blocks down the road. I can still hear her voice. I know she was touching me, but no one saw her. Freaks me out still. Doit for the cats. I had a very similar experience. Terrible car accident, had to be cut out, and a woman was there comforting me, but she didn't sit in the car with me. She was outside the car but sat next to me and told me help was coming and everything would be okay. 20 years later and her calming presence is still so vivid to me. Cookie, Motor 9015. Holy crap, literally the exact same thing happened to me. I was in a terrible car accident. A tree fell on and crushed the car I was driving. There was a woman kneeling outside the car, holding my hand, and telling me everything was okay, and I was going to be okay. The next thing I knew, a cop was holding up the roof of the car with one hand, holding my arm with the other, and telling me that he was going to pull me out on 3 as someone cut through the side of the car. I don't know who that woman was or where she went, or if she was even there, but I'll never forget her, as you said, calming presence. I totally believed everything would be okay because of her. Orinoco. Many years ago, I remember hearing or reading about a woman who suddenly heard a voice in her head, advising her to go to a doctor. She did so, and a brain tumor was discovered. After the examination, she thought to herself how lucky she was, and the voice apparently responded, "We are glad to have been of service." I've been trying to track down the story for years. It could be something fictional I've garbled in my brain, without success.